Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for November 9th, 2022. Let me begin by saying it's too early to make a full assessment of the midterm elections yesterday. They are inconclusive despite the pomposity of the pundits who claim to know what happened. But whatever the ultimate results will be, and we'll carry them as they come in, there are two things which are completely clear. One, with a few exceptions, candidates from neither party presented an alternative to the war danger, that is the US-NATO targeting of Russia with the implications for the potential danger of nuclear war, nor on the economy. Yes, everyone's against inflation, but what's the plan? What were they going to do? The cause of inflation, the major cause, which has been the deindustrialization of economies, quantitative easing to save the banks and the financial cartels, bailouts in the form of trillions of dollars, budget cuts, anti-growth Green New Deal, and no discussion of the role of the Federal Reserve, which is the servant of the big banks and the financial cartels. In the absence of any serious discussion, does anybody know what they were voting for in terms of the economy? Obviously not, and this was a lost opportunity by candidates from both parties to address the two big issues confronting us, the danger of a World War III which could become nuclear, and the undercutting of economic development by the assortment of policies which have caused inflation and the commitment to the Green New Deal. Now, the second thing that's clear is that motion continues around the world to reject the existing sole superpower economic model, to reject the demands of the unipolar order that nations give up their sovereignty and bow to the agenda of the Wall Street City of London banks who are pushing the Great Reset and the Green New Deal. Instead, many nations of the global South are refusing, to back up U.S. sanctions against Russia and are looking for alternatives to the dollar system. There have been conferences underway for months now of groups such as the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa organization, which is looking to expand, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, and so on. And what are they talking about? They're discussing alternatives to the City of London Wall Street system, which has not allowed economic development, not only for the developing sector, but is deindustrializing and thoroughly weakening the economies of the North and the advanced sector. So what are they talking about? Trade and investment in regional currencies. Some discussion includes the Chinese using the yuan to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, the discussions between India and Russia on ruble-rupee relations, and so on. Across the world, the moves of Argentina and Algeria and Saudi Arabia to join the BRICS. This is going on at a continuous pace, which is the move away from the collapsing system. And they're talking about currencies backed not by printing presses, but by physical goods, production of physical goods, and not just gold, although gold may play a role, but other metals and raw materials, including oil and gas, including fertilizer and food production, and so on. So these new institutions are coming into being as an alternative to a system which benefits the handful of billionaires at the expense of the populations of the nations of the North and the attempt to maintain colonial control over nations of the South. Maybe not owning them as in the old colonial period, but preventing them from developing by control of credit and trade relations. Now, what's necessary is to go with the Schiller Institute proposal, put forward increasingly by Helga LaRouche at a series of conferences. And this is for a new financial architecture hand in hand with a new security architecture. This includes bankruptcy reorganization, Don't keep bailing out bankrupt companies and bankrupt financial institutions in a way that debases the currencies that are used to do that. Instead, put them through bankruptcy reorganization. If they can't pay the debt, maybe they should be put out of business. No more bailouts. Instead of putting the burden on the taxpayer, put it on the speculators who built up the debt. And then along with that, an economic policy of Hamiltonian credit, which provides new issues of credit to the physical goods producing economy, not printing presses. And a model for this is the success of the Eurasian Land Bridge, the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is part of what's being discussed by the nations that are moving away from the dollar system. Let me get to something from yesterday. I reported on the rumors of U.S.-Russian talks going on for a possible Ukraine settlement, and there was discussion that maybe Ukraine is going to be put under pressure by the United States. Well, the Chinese said don't believe it, and we now have more evidence to show that this was an election stunt by the Biden administration. The rumors were sparked by a presentation from National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan to a Council on Foreign Relations online event, where he said there are talks underway to counter the risk of potential use of nuclear weapons. But when asked for specifics, he said he couldn't talk about them because you need to protect the communication channels. Well, the Russian deputy foreign minister said there are no negotiations with the U.S. on Ukraine. This has been the Biden administration's policy of not discussing it, of letting Zelensky decide what to do, knowing full well that the Russians and most of the world are aware that Zelensky is a puppet of NATO and London and U.S. interests. Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, denied the Wall Street Journal's story on these rumors, saying, quote, Anglo-Saxon newspapers release a lot of hoax stories, unquote. Well, speaking of hoax stories, there was a huge pranking, trolling done of U.S. media and U.S. officials yesterday with a reporting as though it were serious of a sarcastic social media post attributed to Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is called Putin's chef, who's someone supposedly close to Putin. This was reported in the New York Post, the Associated Press, and commented on by the White House itself. The Post quoted Prigozhin as saying, quote, we have interfered in U.S. elections. We are interfering, and we will continue to interfere. Carefully, accurately, surgically, and in our own way as we know how to do. Now, this was immediately jumped on by Russiagators saying, see, we told you the Russians interfered in the 2016 and 2020 election and are going to do it again. But they left out the other part that was quoted in the New York Post, in which he said, during our pinpoint operations at interference, we will remove both kidneys and the liver at once. Now, this is clearly a sarcastic trolling of gullible elements, not gullible, but evil elements in the U.S. media and officials. But Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre commented on it and said, these comments, quote, do not tell us anything new or surprising, unquote, except their inability to distinguish between a joke and serious policy. She went on to say that we know that Russia's efforts in interfering in elections are aimed at undermining democracy. Well, democracy is being undermined by the censorship regime, by the U.S. policies around the world supporting coups and regime change. This is not something done by the Russians. This is a self-inflicted policy effect. Now, a final note on the economy. The Schiller Institute will be holding a conference this Saturday online from 10 a.m. Eastern Time titled The Physical Economy of the Noosphere, Reviving the Heritage of Vladimir Vernadsky. Now, Vernadsky was often cited by the late Lyndon LaRouche as a scientist whose insights apply to the most significant questions regarding the relationship between human creativity and the unfolding of processes in the physical universe that by investigating these, it allows for expanding man's power over nature. And that's a key determinant in determining productivity. The physical power man has to transform the earth to make it more habitable and to ensure that the resources are used more effectively to allow for real growth that is value added to what we pull out of nature. And so this will be a discussion underway this Saturday. There's a link at the bottom of the description page, and I hope you'll join us then. So hopefully in the next couple of days, we'll have more to say on the midterm elections, and that's my report for today.